Hello, my dears, and welcome to this episode of Moms Who Poll. My name is Andrea, and I am your most average mom who polls. Awesome. All right. Well, hi, Erin. Thank you so much for talking with me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so honored.
Oh, I know we were talking before the recording hit about how much I admire your passion and your convictions, and I think it's just such a great way to be and way to like live your life and put that out there into the world. I know that you're a pole dancer and you're a sometimes competitive pole dancer as well. Is that right?
No. I competed in exactly one competition from PSO. There were two competitors, and I got second place and last place, which I think is super funny. I'm not against potentially competing again, but no.
I think I've heard from other people who, I've had these chats with, they talk about it's not really so much about how you place because there's a lot of factors that influence how you place, but it's about the process of preparing and dedicating that time to yourself to put yourself out there on the stage, and that
Yeah.
is more impactful than the actual placement.
Yeah, I think a lot of things that people from not just pole, but like other competitive dance arenas like about competitions is just meeting people. Like you meet so many people in the pole community and you're connecting to so many people. So like everyone who saw my video, which like I can't even watch anymore. I'm just like, wow, it's horrible. Like I still talk to those people, and the person who won first place is super cool and doing cool stuff. So it's just cool to meet other people. I think that would be the main reason for me to do a competition again.
Absolutely. That's kind of what goes through my mind when I think about competing again. And then I go, oh, but I have to work towards a goal. That's a huge
Yeah.
commitment.
Yeah, it totally is. And it's a time commitment too, where you're like, all right, I have this goal and now like I actually have to do it by a certain time, which is always, I don't know, it puts the heat on. It's a pressure thing.
And then life happens, and then you have to make choices and decisions about what is going to go by the wayside while you either pursue competing or you let competing go by the wayside to take care of whatever else is going on.
Totally. Totally.
So,
Yeah.
how long have you been polling?
It'll be 6 years this March.
Oh, happy Polarversary.
Thank you. I'm just thinking about the Dan Rosen thing where it's like, oh, you've been pole dancing a long time. You must be really good. They're like, no.
Reality is often disappointing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, that's awesome. Are you are you traveling then this year? Is that part of your like 6 year anniversary to go to the pole camp?
I am. I'm doing my first pole camp. I'm actually doing my first travel, like long international multi-night travel away from my kid too, which is wild.
I
So,
Yeah, I am doing the same thing. I think I'm going to the same camp the week before you. Um,
why?
and I really wanted my husband to come with me, but we couldn't find anyone to watch the kids. So he's staying with the kids and I'm going. And the number of times I have said I'm not going, forget it, I'm going to get my deposit back. And then been like, just kidding, I'm going. It's been like 10 times. And he finally told me
Yeah.
last night, he was like, book the flights, you're going. Like, you need this. And I'm really happy for you.
Yay. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Having supportive pole husbands is such a privileged and so nice. My husband is similar. He's like, I'm so excited for you because like he's done little things like gone to Colorado. He like goes up and does recording sessions. He travels for work. And a lot of times, like, even though I would love to be a good person and be happy for him, I'm really resentful. I'm like, cool, you're like going to South Africa and I'm here. But it's really nice that like when it came around to be my turn, he's like, this is so great for you. I'm like, oh, thanks. Thanks, buddy.
That's that's so sweet. I've seen him in pole classes before. He comes and like takes classes and supports you.
Yeah, it's been a minute, but yeah, he did some showcases himself. He did one without me. Like he did a co-ed showcase without me.
Yes. I
Yeah.
remember I remember very clearly the first time I met your husband was in a pole class. And at the end, we had to go around the room and say what we were grateful for. And he said, I'm so grateful that my wife has such a supportive group and like something like a hobby, not a hobby, but he said something like, something that she loves so much that gives her so much joy. And I was like,
Oh,
oh, wow,
yeah, he's a good one.
he really is. That's really nice that he supports you that way. And I can tell it means a lot to you. And you're right. It is a privilege. Like we are lucky to have such supportive partners. Um, I
Yeah.
know it wasn't always that way. With my husband, he, he thought that I was starting pole, obviously, to enrich his life. And then he got real sad when the bruising and the soreness did not enrich his life. And then he went to a showcase and realized what it was about, and then he got it,
Aw.
and then came around again. But through the enrichment of my life, it enriches his life. If we feel good and confident in ourselves, then we can show up and be the confident matriarchs for our family. um,
Yeah.
so and I noticed that,
Yeah.
with your husband coming to your classes, like pole is a bit of a family affair for you. And I see sometimes when you're dancing at home, the little one gets involved. What kind of conversations, if any, did you and your spouse have about how you were going to treat pole in your house with your child?
Yeah. So I mean, just internet safety in general is a big discussion in our house. Like pretty much as soon as she got her computer at the start of the pandemic, we were like, all right, like you are not allowed to talk to anyone through DM. Like it's really important you don't give away information about yourself. And so like poll is similar because like so much of my whole life is on the internet. Like that's how I connect to other people outside of just like the small bubble. So like she has to wear pole clothes. She has her own little pole clothes. She like can't go traipsing around and like just underwear in the background if like I'm on a class. And there is like a nervousness for me about it because like like it is kind of a fringe sport. Like the origins are in strip clubs. Like there is a lot of judgment that can come with it. But for me, and like especially Nolan's really good about this. He's like, I can't wait to have those conversations with her if someone is like being judgmental about it, about like how it is for initially for me, I got into pole because it was like reclaiming a part of my sexuality after birth. And so that at this point is kind of like faded, like my reasons for being in pole have shifted. Um, and I think that in terms of like conversations for raising up like a generation of like strong, empowered girls and women, that it's really important to me to model and just being open and comfortable with what I am instead of like hiding it. Like my Instagram is public and everything goes there. There's no separation of like, all right, this is my poll and this is like my, I don't know. Like I used to have like an environmental account, which is now deceased. And I think that that's just a value of mine to be like, you get everything. And that's totally privilege based. Like I there was a time in my life where like I was like, oh, like I might want to go to grad school, and now I'm like, if they don't want my pole self, they don't get all of me. So
It,
yeah,
you're right. It
that's
is
kind of where. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, you're right. It is a privilege to be able to say you get all of me, but I do think it's important that if you
Totally.
have that opportunity that you take it, because too often what I see is problematic with, how we are as women is we're either mothers or we're like, single sexy women, or you're either one thing or another. And that pops up in social media when you start fragmenting your accounts. And the reality is we're these multifaceted people. We're mothers and lovers and all kinds of various things. We're career people or not. And when we start sectioning ourselves off like that, we end up compartmentalizing parts of our lives that take away from the fact that we are greater than the sum of our parts. So I think it's great that you take that step. I know it took a lot for me to do that too. I was private for a
Yeah,
long time, multiple accounts, and finally I just gave up and I was like, yep, I'm a pole
this is
dancer.
me. I'm Andrea. Yeah, not to derail the question or like the conversation, but like I actually don't really identify as a woman. I identify as non-binary, which like it doesn't need to derail a conversation. But for me, like I identify as mom, I identify as girl, they, and non-binary generally.
I love that. Thank you for
But
sharing.
yeah,
That's awesome.
yeah,
So, what does pole mean for you
yeah.
now? If originally you started to reclaim your sensuality post birth, how over the years did it change?
So I did dance throughout my life and I did it a lot in college and it was a way of self-expression. And when I first got into pole, my friend Jamie took me to a pole class and I was like, I don't get it. Like, I don't like it. I don't get it. And then I saw Marion Crump and I was like, oh, I get it. Like to me, the part of pole that I find very enticing is that's what keeps me going when I'm like, well, what am I doing? Like, why am I spending so much money and time on this hobby? Is there's things I want to do and there's a way I want to express myself through pole. So at this point, it is like it's therapy, it's emotional expression, it's exercise and mental health, and it's the people that I know and care about too. It is one of my communities that I really care about.
I love that. That's so great, Erin.
Yeah.
I I like that because I was going to ask you, I know that you have danced and you do have a lot of passions and hobbies that are outside of pole. Um like I know that I've seen you do ballet dancing. Um you're very involved in your local community, which could take us in a whole other topic. And then, you're also on, I think, sometimes like a personal one person mission to save the world. From uh how how do you balance all of that? Because I do see that you're very out there, like in terms of like, this is how I feel, this is what I feel strongly about, like these issues. And there's a lot of issues that you feel strongly about. Like, how are you able to devote all the time energetically to all those things?
I don't. So I prioritize. And I say, all right, Finna comes first. So, like, there are things I would love to be doing, but I just can't. Like, I have definitely had like a grieving and mourning process about not doing 31 days with Dan this year because I'm like, oh, I really want to do it. Like, my mental health is so good when I do it. I feel so strong, but I've just had like three upper respiratory infections. And from my like two nutrition classes, like, I'm not an RD, I know that for me, when I overtrain, I'm going to get upper respiratory infections. So I'm just like trying to be well. So it's prioritized. I have to say, like, okay, like this needs to take priority. And maybe it's not always going to be like that, but it needs to be that way for right now. And just do it again and again and again.
That's awesome. I do see in terms of your environmental focus, like that seems to be a pretty fair constant in your life in terms of things that you do, but it does vary in the way you go about doing it, I guess, if that makes
Totally.
sense.
Yeah, I think like when I started it off, it was very individual. And I was like, I will do these individual things. And if we all do these individual things, then the world will get better. And I think there's merit in that because we have control over that. And that's something that we can do. And I also think that reaching out and doing something together in community is so valuable, just like for the longevity of caring about things and just policy-based solutions, I think can have a huge impact. Whereas there's like a How to Save a Planet podcast where they talk about your individual carbon footprint. It's like it has 0.000000000, that's 9 zeros after the decimal point, 3 impact on overall climate change. And it's like, well, like so I think there's totally value in doing individual stuff, but like if we could focus on policy things and making sure people have like their basic needs met and then pushing the envelope, which I think overlaps in a lot of ways, that would be really that's kind of my focus at this point.
I think that's fantastic. I don't know if I told you this before, but there is no recycling here.
It's so wild.
We still have a separate bin for our our recyclables. And then we
But they
just
don't go
kind of,
anywhere.
yeah, like we just
Yeah.
can't get out of the habit. We still separate all of our trash and then it all goes into one bin because they don't do recycling here.
Yeah, and there's so many municipal things like that that are so important, like green waste or composting. Composting would have such a big impact numbers wise on things like climate change and like creating better soil. And so it's like, when I'm freaking out about like a to-go cup, it's like I could be like mobilizing and emailing reps and being like, hey, like, could we get this in this place? Hey, could we get like municipal textile recycling as my next big like, let's do it.
But I think, like you said, it's all about control, like what you can control, and you can control your own
Totally.
behavior. And through your own behaviors, you're expending energy when you're learning like a new process for yourself or creating a new habit, right? So let's say let's say I was from the place I'm currently living in and I had never recycled in my life. And then I moved to California where they do recycle and I have to spend like mental energy to like learn that process of separating my trash and
Yeah.
and so through that like it's taking that time and energy, but at a certain point I'm going to get to a place where it's like second nature to me, and then
Mhm.
I may have more more mental and energetic capacity to start rallying for that that larger scale change, that policy level change. So
Yeah.
incremental change is definitely one of the ways that we see most like lasting effects of change. Ooh, I'm going to start getting on a little tangent here. But
Let's go.
yeah, let's just do it. But I think that has more lasting change than very like coercive like big sudden change, because you get not
Yeah.
everyone has that buy-in at that point. Um
Mhm.
I remember reading something about how in the the 90s there was in the 1900s for my younger listeners back in the 1900s. um but back in the 90s there was drinking fountains everywhere, and then over a period of time people started to like carry a water bottle with them, and you would want to maybe a reusable water bottle, and they came in different colors, and then we went from having drinking fountains everywhere, and obviously COVID kind of put a kibosh on drinking fountains almost permanently, I
Yeah.
think. But over time you saw less and less of these drinking fountains or these like one cup kind of disposable situations, and everyone started carrying water bottles with them. And there was this person that I knew in the 90s, they like left, they came back in like the mid 2000s, and they're like, where are all the drinking fountains? But they had been gone for such a long period of time. It was incremental to us. We didn't notice the difference. But to this person,
Yeah.
they leave and come back. It's this huge change. So
Yeah.
to
That's so
pull it,
funny.
yeah, and to pull it back to pole, like, it's the same way when you're learning something in pole, right? At first, everything's hard, you're sweaty, or maybe you don't stick at all. You're just trying to do a fireman spin without like taking your life in your hands.
Yeah.
And then eventually it becomes second nature. And same thing with inverts. I know that's like the gold standard for a
Yeah.
lot of people, which, don't get me started. I think you could have a really wonderful and satisfying journey as a pole dancer and never invert. But, I know a lot of people like that's a goal for them. And it's so hard, and it expends so much energy as you're learning to get your body to do the right things. And then one day you do it, and then you keep doing it. And then, fast forward, months down the road, and it's part of your warm up. It's second nature. You're no longer expending that energy to do that thing.
Yeah, that's definitely true. And I think like you can still have a rewarding pole practice and have things not perfect or messy. Like there are so many tricks that I have because I have a messy invert, and it's still rewarding to get to those tricks, even though my messy inverts are like knee hook. Like they look horrible. Like I have to condition them all the time for them to look good. And in order to do that, it's just like it's a huge amount of time, and figuring out figuring out what you want to dedicate time to in pole is really important. It's prioritizing. Like, do I want to condition inverts? Is that a goal of mine? Like, not everyone needs to have perfect inverts to have a rewarding pole practice, in my
Exactly.
humble opinion.
I,
In
I'm
my
with you
humble
there.
trashy invert opinion. If you're safe, if you're not doing something that's going to injure yourself, like what is the value really of like pointing your toes and like having straight lines? If you're engaging the right muscles, you do you, boo, you know?
Yes, 100%. And I mean, I think that's the goal of, a pole practice, is you get some sort of value out of it, whether it's to
Yeah.
compete, mental health, reclaim your sensuality, whatever it is that's brought you to pole. It may or may not include clean lines. That is something though that if you're like a level 3, let's say you're an aerial inverter and you show up at a level 1 tricks class, you better believe that your instructor is going to be like, all right, then point your toes. Like, I'm going to find something to nitpick here. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. I think like for me, like I'm always looking for ways to get better, but I'm also really self-critical. So I don't want to be like, oh, like I can't show up and I can't do this because I don't have an invert. Because like I'd just be stuck on inverts 6 years deep, not doing anything else. If I was like, well, I can't progress to anything else unless I have the perfect invert, whatever that means, you know?
yeah,
So
depending on what I've eaten in any given day, I may or may not be able to invert.
it's a deep feel.
If
Yeah.
if I've had something with a lot of MSG in it, I'm not inverting for 2 days.
I saw your post. I was like, oh, dang, that's rough. Are you feeling better?
I am, thankfully. I'm starting to feel like myself, and my fingers are only slightly swollen around my rings now. I
Yeah.
just and I love I pronounce it as pho. I don't know if it's pronounced differently.
I
Um,
think it's
Pho. Okay. Yeah, I loved it when we lived in San Diego. I could eat it all the time. It was like a healthy like soup that I really enjoyed. I don't know what is different about here, but the recipe
yeah.
has some other stuff in it. One time, and I don't know, I must be a slow learner. No, I am a slow learner. This is not the first time I've had this reaction. This is probably the fourth time I've had this reaction. And
Aw.
one time it was so bad, I thought I was having like an actual allergic reaction, like heart rate went up, head started pounding, and like I had a bad headache. My eyelids like started getting swollen, and I had to take a Benadryl. And I don't have any allergies. I've never had that happen before. And I thought I
Wow.
was going to die, death by pho.
Oh my God. That does sound rather allergy-like though, you know? Maybe it's time for patch testing. Figure out if you're allergic to something in pho, like I don't know, bean sprouts or basil. It's just wild.
Well, and I can eat all of those ingredients on their own. So I think it's something that's
Oh,
happening in the broth specific
okay.
to this, excuse me, specific to this location that's doing it.
Uh, that's
Um,
such a bummer. I'm sorry.
it is, it's tough. It's a tough adjustment because I can't really eat out here in general because of the salt level. I can't go out
Yeah,
to eat or I'm sick. So I'm not conditioned for the local cuisine, unfortunately. I was really looking forward to digging deep and really experiencing the culture and everything this place has to offer, especially through food, because I strongly believe that you experience a culture through their culinary pathways.
totally. Yeah.
Yeah. But unfortunately that's not for me.
I'm
Sad.
sorry. So not only do you have three jobs, you now have to cook all your meals at home. No big deal. Three jobs, two kids, and she's cooking all her meals at home.
Exactly. Well, don't worry.
Aw,
I have delegated some of the cooking to my very supportive partner, and
nice.
he really likes it. I can see why he did better in chem lab than I did in college. So he follows my recipes.
Nice. What does he make?
So he is really into making spaghetti. That's like his thing.
Nice.
It's his way of sneaking vegetables into the kids' diet.
Love that.
And he really likes to make fish tacos, especially when we get like homesick. Yeah.
Oh,
We'll do like some good like Baja fish tacos or he really likes to make like various meats and stuff, which I'm not as I will eat red meat, but I'm not the biggest red meat eater. So I'll have a
yeah.
little bit. But we really like this account called Shred Happens, and he posts like all of
Oh.
this like healthy protein packed meals, and then he'll have them with like cauliflower rice, and I'll send them to my husband and be like, oh, and look, you can just do regular rice and it's fine.
And we're good.
Defeat the
You seen
purpose
that?
of the low carb meal, but
You seen that tweet that's like, I think we're asking too much of cauliflower. Spoke to me on a deep level.
that was the
Yeah.
other day in conditioning. Dan Rosen said if they can make cauliflower into pizza, you can do your shoulder mount.
Yeah, it's an abomination. Don't even get me started.
Defeats the
I mean,
purpose.
it's great if you have like celiacs or like a wheat allergy. I'm all here for it.
Yeah.
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 Caveats. Caveats.
Yes, definitely. Such a tangent. Yeah, it is interesting. I'm not one of those people where I feel like I have like a gluten allergy, and yet I get sick every time I eat copious amounts of bread or pasta. So
Yeah. Yeah. Everything in moderation, I think, is like the golden nutrition rule. As long as you're not allergic, everything in moderation.
and yet that rebuts the culture that we have of if one's good, two is better.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I
It is
think
what
the
it is.
same. Yeah, and kind of pulling it back to our original discussion, when you first, I think when you, well, I don't know if this happened for you, but it did for me. Like when you first find pole, it feels so good. It's so much fun. So if one's good, two is better. I'm not just going to take one class. I'm going to take two classes. I'm going to take
I,
five classes. Yeah.
I'm still working through that. I think this month, like, my life has just been discombobulated. So I'm like, all right, like I'm gonna step back from pole and like I'm really trying to learn how to not overtrain and how to train in stuff I just want to train in. Cause I think for so long, like there's so much pressure to do all the things. And last year I was like, yeah, I'm gonna get really good at like edge work and heel work. And then I was like, I'm not getting joy out of this. Like, this is my hobby. Like, I'm really privileged that like it is my hobby. Like, I don't have to make money off it. I don't have to be like hot. I don't have to be like engaging or nice. I can just like show up and be like, I'm here and I just want to do things I like at this point. And it's really hard to not be like, oh, like I'm having such a good time. I really want Aisha. I really want like rainbow marching and just like overstretch and overtrain yourself into like injury. Cause like at the end of the day, a lot of us like we need to be well and overtraining means that we're injured and we're out for months and like that feels bad for our mental health, for our exercise routine, for our families. Like the first time I got injured, I couldn't lift my arm and like Nolan had to help with stuff. And it's like it's not sustainable to be injured all the time. So finding that balance is really important and I'm always working on it. Like always working on okay, like what's too much, what's too little. It's hard.
It is. And when one of the things that I do appreciate about you is that you're very honest about going through these seasons in your life with regards to whether it's pole or any of your other passions, that you are very aware that you need to moderate different things in order to achieve like the whole, uh like the
Yeah.
totality of everything. And yet you're very humble about it in the sense that you're still learning. I think that's like, what is it? Like a smart person knows that they don't know everything. Whereas, you
Oh,
know,
thanks.
I think for a lot of us, we think that, well, this is going to take me down a different tangent. Perhaps we were
Love it.
conditioned by our parents' generation that, we're supposed to do it all. And then we
Hmm.
have to unlearn that as adults, realizing that we can't do it all, whether it's because the environment is not set up for us to be able to do it all, or just the fact that maybe we've set standards that are unreasonable for ourselves. And
Totally.
we have a responsibility to the next generation to model that moderation that you were talking about, so that
Yeah.
our next generation doesn't end up growing up like in our shadow trying to compete with us.
Yeah, that is actually one of the things I'm really working on in my parenting journey right now is my child wants to do everything. And right now she's got like five different extracurriculars and I'm checking in with her. I'm like, "Hey, like are you enjoying this? Are you enjoying that? Like how are you feeling? I want to make sure you have downtime." And she's like, "I know that you don't want to do all these extracurriculars, but I really want to." And I'm like, "Well, like so it's a balance, like, of being like, "Oh, like, how do I model this? Am I modeling it?" And, like, how do I make sure that she's not just, like, overextending herself because she's 6, you know? And, like, she would eat 7-Eleven for every meal if she could. She would do a million extracurriculars if she could, but, like, part of being a good parent is being like, "Hey, here's some boundaries." Like, you can have 7-Eleven with, like, your chocolate milk and mac and cheese and cucumbers and carrots or whatever. And they're like, hey, like you can do like 4 extracurriculars instead of like, we're going to do something 6 days a week, which is insane.
It is, and
It's just, yeah.
I like the idea of allowing your child to lead there. With my kids, they want to do a lot of things, but they don't want to put in the work for a lot of things. And so, unfortunately, I've had to be that person that comes in and says, and I come at it from such a financial standpoint, which I don't know if that's good or bad, but I'm like, hey, I'm paying for you to go to do this, this, and this, and this. And I'm just asking that you practice or not fight with me when it's
Yeah.
time to go. Because if you don't want to do it, like let's scale back so we can just do the things that you want to do. But it always ends with me being like, such a product of boomer parents and going, I'm not wasting my money on this.
I hear that. I 100% hear it. We usually approach it through commitment. So, like, hey, we paid for this. We made this commitment. Like, soccer was a huge battle this entire last season because we finally tried team sports for like an actual team, not just like go and play soccer with like some kids. And she was like, I don't want to do soccer. And I was like, that's okay. We never have to do it again, but we are going to go for this duration because we made a commitment. And then we never have to do it again. So this worked so far, knock on wood. But yeah, kids
I
are.
yeah. It's tough. I feel like kids are well, there's so much of what we do that, is really just a reflection of us. And,
Yep,
I feel like my kids, they're a little mini reflection of me, some of my best
totally.
qualities, some of my worst qualities. And it's the same thing when when I pull, I see my best qualities and my worst qualities. And my worst qualities definitely is that perfectionist in me, the one I I, I have a I'm a high achiever. So achiever is one of my strengths. It's actually my top strength, which is a double-edged sword, right? You're constantly reaching for the stars, right? But if you get there, you're like, all right, what's next? And
Yeah,
you don't take the time to celebrate your successes. And that can be really problematic when you're in a leadership role, i.e., parenting. Uh, so your child has a success, you must take this moment to stop and celebrate, right? Um,
yeah,
but like in my pole practice, I got my invert and there was never a moment, and it took me a long time to invert, a really long time. There
same.
was there was never a moment where I was like, oh, I finally got it. Yay. I never did that. I was like, good. Finally, let's move on.
Now what can I do? What's the next goal?
Yeah. Now
Yeah, it's
yeah.
so important to celebrate those wins, and I feel like especially as parents, we don't get the opportunity a lot of times to be like, hey, like I really like I did the thing. 'Cause it's like, okay, like I checked off these things. I've done this thing. What else can I do? And
Exactly.
I think that like I have a therapist who used to say the way you do one thing is the way you do all things. And I think that's really true for me personally, is I'm like, all right, and what else are we doing?
Right. I
Yeah.
see that popping up everywhere. You're absolutely right. The way we do one thing is the way we do all things. That's genius. Mind blown.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. It hurts a little.
it does.
Yeah,
It really does.
there's an ongoing joke in my household that like we have to rewatch shows or movies because like I sit for like 20 minutes and I'm like, all right, and I'm like up and I'm cleaning something or I'm like making a to-do list or I'm decluttering something and Nolan's like, are you actually gonna sit and watch it? And I'm like, maybe. Like, I don't know. I think part of that is just my brain. Like I am just a high energy person and I have diagnosed ADHD. So it's just I'm moving, but part of it's just like I don't know. I I think I just like to be doing something, and there is this part of me that's like, is it learned? And like, is it is it a good or is it a problem? And I think like you were saying, like my strength is also my weakness. Like my ability to be a busybody will also come down hard on me at times when like I've had 3 upper respiratory infections in like a month and a half where I'm like, maybe I should chill out.
It's true. It's like your body waits for the moment that it senses that you're done with like the big stress situation. And then it's like, all right, now it's time for you to rest and take care of us. So, because you were
Yeah.
traveling right before you got sick, right?
Yeah. We're really lucky that Finna and I can tag on to Nolan's work trips. So like we have been able to go places that we wouldn't be able to normally go. And that's been a huge privilege. So we got to go to Singapore. And then we were supposed to go to Bali and we got really sick in Singapore. And I was like, we gotta go home.
Oh my God.
So we went home. I was supposed to perform and I didn't get to perform because I was like, I don't think I can like make it through. Like I was just so sick. So I think that primed me for being sick through like most of this winter. But yeah, it's a balancing act to be like, all right, what do I have capacity for and what are my priorities?
Absolutely. So when you get like overwhelmed, let's say, in the absence of sickness, when you just have a lot going on in your life and you're making the priorities, I do ask this of everyone, just so you know. Um, what's the first thing to go? What are you like, nope, not doing it?
So I had to do this recently last fall and it was very humbling. And it's volunteer stuff. Like unpaid labor outside of unpaid domestic labor is the first to go. So like I had joined the PTA's health and wellness co-chair and I was like, I'm out. Sent a very nice professional like resignation email. I was like, thank you so much and bye. So that's always the first to go. And then like next would probably be, ooh, I'm having a moment of like deep internal honesty. I was like, next I really want it to be like social media, but is it? I don't think it is. Um, yeah, honestly, it changes. It really changes depending on the season I'm in, what's next to go. I tried to go back and do school during the pandemic and like I guess it's still the pandemic, but in 2020 to do like to take sports nutrition actually to figure out how to not get injured in pole. And then I kind of bobbed around doing other stuff, but I let my unpaid domestic labor go. And so like things just got super messy and I was like, I can't live like this. Like, I gotta stop being in school. Like I need a clean environment. This is not gonna work for me. So it changes. It changes depending on what I'm doing, what's the first to go. But always volunteer work is like, sorry, gotta put on my oxygen mask.
Right. You got to put on your oxygen mask first before you can assist those next to you.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you too. This is going back a while, but this goes back to parenting and how you're choosing to raise your daughter. I find that in pole, a lot of what we do um, is like in it's like we're removing layers of shame through a movement practice. It's not that the
Yeah.
classes are necessarily like the classes are not trauma informed or, meant to be therapy, but in a way, like we're moving in ways that feel good to us. And we might be moving our bodies in ways that, elsewhere in society, we've been told not to. And through that, you start kind of, remove like I think of it like removing layers of shame. Like for me, it's like shame about body image, like shame about like who I am, like where I am in my life and stuff. And I don't know if it's the same for you, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I definitely find pole super healing in a way that I find other communities of dance not quite as fulfilling or healing. Like I think that there's a lot of freedom in pole and a lot of acceptance in pole. And I think a lot of that comes from the origins of being in strip clubs and it being such a unique and evolving form of dance. Like something like ballet has been mainstream for what, 400 years? So like it's a double-edged sword because you have like this very strict guideline of how to teach it and how to train it and who can teach it. And then you also have these very rigid rules about like what you can wear and how you can move your body. And what I find so freeing about pole is there are no rules because I love to break rules. So like at pole I can show up and I can dance to whatever. Like I can dance to there's so many different things that people dance to. There's so many different ways they express themselves. There's so many different kinds of people, like shapes of bodies and like people from all different walks of life. It really is a very, very inclusive community in terms of like dance communities in general. It's pretty magical, honestly.
It really is. And I think it's such a gift. It came to me in my life at a point where I desperately needed it. And then when I look on, when I look at, raising, I have two, a boy and a girl, but it's particularly when I look at raising my daughter, because I know what it's like to be a little girl and grow up, um, when I look at my daughter, I think, wow, like there's so much about my experience in pole that has undone shame. And here I have this opportunity to prevent those layers of shame from covering up my daughter's spirit, right? And
Yeah.
I like I it's kind of it's an overwhelming responsibility. And give an example. I think I've told you about this. I was at like a checkup for her, like a pediatrician appointment, and the pediatrician recommended this book about, because she's getting older and body changes and all that. And I happened to read the reviews before I purchased this book that was recommended to me by a pediatrician. And there were a lot of parents saying, my child didn't have body image issues until they read this book.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Oh
Because
my
the,
God.
the book said things like, I think the book would have been great for like when we were kids. I don't know if that makes sense. Like things were a little different on the playground then, and, playgrounds could be kind of rough. And so the book would say things like, so what if people think you're fat because your breasts are big? You're beautiful on the inside. And it's like,
Oh.
what? Right. So I'm like, no, absolutely not. My daughter's not getting this book. um,
Yeah.
but it reminded me a little bit of, I remember you had talked to me about, or maybe you just posted it, where one of your daughter's teachers had come to you about what's appropriate for her to wear at school.
Yeah. I mean, like all of that starts so young. It's heartbreaking. I remember starting to limit food when I was 10 because a friend had told me that my thighs were fat. And so it starts so young, but like my daughter has made comments about like has made fat phobic comments that I'm like I try not to get reactive. It's so hard and try to like get inquisitive and curious, like, oh, like what do you mean by that? Like why would it be why would it be a problem to be fat? Like I have fat, everyone has fat, but it's just like it's really, really sad how deeply ingrained into our culture it is and how incredibly early it starts. The thing that you're referencing in particular is that her kindergarten teacher, I was like, hey, how are things going socially? He's like, oh, they're good. Like, she's an active kid. And then and he was like, well, one thing I would say is that sometimes like her underwear is showing and she like kids will kind of like look and laugh and like immediately like Nolan watched my face just go into like battle mode and I was just so upset and then Nolan was like, well, one thing that she could do is that you're right, she could wear shorts, or another thing that could happen is that kids could be told not to look. And her teacher was like, oh, okay. But it's like the dress code, the rules, like I would say that we are pretty permissive parents. I would like to think we're authoritative. Like we explain why she can and can't do things. But like there's no makeup allowed at school, no spaghetti straps. Like the dress code is very intentionally misogynistic and it's very old school
For kindergartners.
or elementary school, which is wild because like my kid has been doing face paint for years. Like that's just the way she expresses herself. And I think it is like very much a younger generation, but these old school rules just like have not caught up and been revised. And that was a big reason why I was like, I gotta get on this PTA. I gotta like work through some things with the school. But yeah, it's really hard because like basically I'm like, you can wear makeup to school and I will have a conversation with the principal. And you can wear spaghetti straps because like I'll show up to school and she'll be wearing spaghetti straps and I'll walk her in and kids will be like, you're not allowed to wear spaghetti straps. And I'm like, well, it's more important to me that she is cool on like a 90-degree day than that she is covering her shoulders. Cause like that's not a priority for me. Health and
Exactly.
safety is a priority.
Exactly. I would love to know how exposed shoulders are detracting from a learning environment at an
For
elementary school.
kindergartners, right? So silly, especially when it's so hot. I mean, like they start school in August and it's like 90 degrees. Like we've had a couple 100-degree days here on the coast, like several years ago, but it gets hot. Like they don't need to be covering their shoulders, you know? So
What
silly.
purpose? Yeah, exactly. What purpose does it serve? And then, and then we wonder why, when we're in like a pole class and we think of it as, healing and freeing because we're allowed to move the way we want to dress the way we want to without someone pointing at us saying
Yeah.
you're not supposed to be doing that. Like
Yeah.
we've our generation is craving that. We crave that need for acceptance as we are, just to express ourselves and for people to say. And one of the things that I love about what you can see and find in a pole class is you're going to see different genders, you're going to see different age groups, you're going to see different ethnicities, but no one is pointing at another person saying, unless it's a safety issue, no one's pointing at another
Yeah.
person saying, you can't wear that, you can't look like that, you can't be here because XYZ. Um,
Yeah.
and we're celebrating each other for showing up just as we are. I come, into a pole class as myself, and whatever was going on outside of my life might come in for a second, then it fades away, and I can be in a room with someone that I may not have that much in common with. But we have this shared connection, and whoever that person is, separate from the outside world, they just exist in that space with me, and they're not told that they can't be who they are in that room. I don't know if that makes sense.
It does. It makes complete sense. I think that there's a very shared and beautiful understanding in pole where like the rest of the world melts away. Like I can be having the worst day or like something weird can be going on and I feel very safe in pole. And I don't know, maybe like to be 100% upfront, I've only ever done online Dan Rosen, a handful of other online classes, and Dollhouse. So like maybe that isn't representative of like the entire pole community, but it's definitely representative of my experience in pole.
Uh, you have a right to experience it however you've experienced it. That's your perspective. That's why we're chatting here today.
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
yeah, we're moms who poll. We're not experts on everything.
That's true.
But I will
Very
say, as a mom who polls, if you're comfortable, what advice would you have for pollers that may have recently become or might soon become moms or parents?
true. Oh. Oh, that's not where I thought that was going at all. Um, I don't know. I honestly don't feel qualified to give advice from that angle because I came to pole postpartum at 6 months postpartum. So like, gosh, I think it would be just such a different experience to have pole under my belt, become pregnant, become a mom, and then try to go back.
Mm,
I think for mom, like I could give advice for people who are moms who are starting pole for the first time.
I'll take it. I'll take it.
My advice would be to feed yourself like an athlete, first and foremost. Get water, get sleep. If you can and have access to it, take a community college nutrition course because you know you're going to get unbiased information in that course. You know you're going to get information based on research on how to feed yourself, not based on someone trying to sell you something. So those would be like, I think that's a great place to start because pole is very athletic, super demanding on the body, and it's so fun, but it's so easy to get injured if you undernourish yourself and overtrain, which are my two biggest faults. So learn from my faults.
That's a really good one. I really like that advice. What's your favorite since you've gone through this? And I had to rebuild my shoulders as well. So favorite prehab or rehab exercise? What's the one
Ooh,
that you loved?
I have so many. I love, I'm not, okay, I'm not a PT. This is just what works for me, but I love one where you hold, I don't know if I can do this, where you hold like a band and then you wrap the stretchy band on the pole and you keep your shoulders super straight, super in line, elbow attached to the side, and you step out. And I feel like that is really good for building stabilization in these muscles that I don't know because I'm not a PT back here.
Behind the shoulder? Yeah.
Uh, that's one of my favorites. Yeah. Yeah. But I think if you have access to it, financial, uh, medical insurance, et cetera, PT is so good at making sure that you are conditioning the whole shoulder. So important.
Absolutely. And I think it's important too when you go to a PT or a body worker, doctor, whoever it is you're going to go to, that you're honest about your sport and what your goals are. And if that person tells you not to do pole anymore or just don't do it if it hurts, you go find someone else. Like,
Yeah. Well, I think there is merit in that. Like a physical therapist is going to come from the perspective of making sure that you are able to move in ways that feel good to you and like in ways that support the longevity of your body. So like you don't want to be doing things that are like twingy painful and going to mean that you like can't do things like dress yourself. Like when I most recently injured my shoulder last year, I couldn't like reach to clean things or like pull on underwear, and like that isn't sustainable.
yeah,
So like
yeah,
I think there's a balance. Like I don't want to go to someone who I feel ashamed about pull, and I also don't want to go to someone who's like, well, you just shouldn't pull anymore. It's not gonna work.
yeah. I've been literally thrown out of doctors' offices for saying that I'm a pole dancer. So that's
Are
why
you serious?
oh yeah. Hmm.
What?
Yeah.
Wow.
So I
Wow.
yeah, and I understand that pole means a lot of different things to a lot of different people, and its origins are its origins, and some people cannot accept that. And it's I guess I guess that's what pole means to them, and they have a problem with anyone who partakes in it. And I happen to be that person. I will say,
Yeah.
yeah, the PT that I worked with last year, I was very upfront. I came in with my Spin City pole Bible with the move that I had messed up my shoulder doing. I was overtraining, not nourishing, just like you were saying. I was prepping for a competition, definitely doing engaging in practices that I shouldn't have engaged in. And I walk in with like the exact move that I did, like in there. And Dan Rosen was the one doing it, and he had this little like smile on his face. Anyway, I pointed to the move, and I was like, "This is what I was doing. This is what I felt. I am a pole dancer." And then I said, "And just so you know, in case you've never worked with one of us before, like we're just a touch psycho. We're gonna keep doing what we're doing anyway. So help me navigate this." And he was very
Good.
honest. Yeah, he was accepting, and he was very honest with me about what I needed to do if if I wanted to pull for as long as I wanted to. Like how I
Yeah.
had to reduce my load and to take time off. And he said, because if you don't, um, you're never going to recover from this, and you're walking down the road to surgery. So
Yeah.
he's like, I'm not telling you to stop. I'm just telling you what your options are. And that was helpful. That's something that I can get behind. But yes, I
Yeah.
went to a doctor's office years ago with like pain in my hip. Um, and I said, well, I'm really into pole dancing and I really like it. And I really want to be able to like, still work on doing the splits. And she said, pole dancing? Well, and she opened up the door and told me to leave.
Unbelievable. Don't they take an oath to treat patients? Wow. Wild. Hmm.
Yeah. Who knows what her baggage was? I'm not responsible for her trauma.
Totally. You are not responsible for that. Yeah, I think before Pole, Nolan and I actually had a big fight for his bachelor party where he was like, I'm gonna go to a strip club. And I was like really upset about it. Like Pole has completely revolutionized the way I think about sex work and being an advocate for sex workers' voices. And I think it's just very interesting to me to be on the other side of that now and feel like deep compassion and empathy and patience for people who just aren't there yet. Who are just like, I'm gonna judge this thing.
It is a journey, and I don't pretend to understand all of it, but I know I'm on that journey and that's okay. I'm right where I need to be,
Yeah.
and keeping an
Yeah,
open mind and learning and uh supporting the community. I think that's what's most important. Um,
totally.
but I do see a lot of intersections in the way like pole has changed my relationship with myself. And because of that, it's changed the way I look at raising my children and how I raise my children instead of being like a carbon copycat of, the previous generation. um, you can pay things forward and know that a lot of what really pulled me into pole was just how it revolutionized the way I felt about myself and removing those layers of shame. And to be able to provide that knowledge as like a gift to my children is something I'm forever going to be grateful for as part of this, this hobby of mine.
Yeah, yeah,
So
I love that. For me, it feels like such a safe place to come back to. And really all of dance feels like a safe place to come back to just be like, okay, like I need to work through some emotions. And I think that that's really what I want to impart on my kid from pole, ballet, lyrical, anything. It's just like this is a safe place where you can come to move through whatever is going on in your life and the world. That's what I find most valuable about it.
that's awesome. Well,
Yeah,
I we could talk all day,
we
honestly.
could.
We really could. We'll have to we'll have to do it again sometime too. Like I said, and well, I'll probably end up cutting this part out of the recording, but Erin, one of the things that I really love about you is that I may not always agree with, whatever stance you've taken on any specific issue, but I admire so much that you show up as the best version of yourself, like every day, and you put it out there so that other people can think for themselves and think about the issue for themselves.
Aw,
And that
thank you.
it means so much to me. Um, so anyway, I have a lot of admiration and respect for you. So,
Well, the admiration and respect is mutual.
thanks.
Yeah, I was just talking to Nolan about, I was like, since I don't know if you're gonna cut this, but since I goofed and missed our appointment, like full disclosure, that's not the first time that's happened in the last several months because my life has been
Poor thing.
chaos, like Elmo burning thing, chaos. And I was like, and this is why Andrea is like employed by Dollhouse and like doing all this stuff is because she has her shit together. And like, I do not at all. I think like just the degree, like just thinking over winter a break when you came down. Like the degree to which like you are there to like be like, all right, like I'm going to do this. I'm going to get this done is amazing. Like you're like, all right, I'm going to pick up these pieces. All right, I'm going to show up. I'm going to work through this. This is hard. And I'm here and I'm doing the work. Like watching your flexibility journey is like, wow, she's making it happen. She is on her way to Rainbow Marchenko.
I joked with Preston the other night that I went through the 7-year itch with pole and fell out of love with pole last year as I hit 7 years and was cheating on it with flexibility training, and now I'm ready to come
Yeah.
home.
Yeah. My kids teacher, Anna Mendoza, gave Finna the best advice about dance when I was like, oh, like I'm really worried she doesn't want to do dance. And Anna was like, it's okay for her to take breaks. Like she's 6 and she's been dancing since she was 2. Like she can take a break and come back to it. And like lo and behold, she took a break and she wanted to come back to it. Cause like that's my big thing. Like I don't care that she dances. I just don't want her to get like burned out and resentful on something.
Yeah, definitely. And it's so hard with pole because I think it's the same way, like you said, like we're scared that if we take a break, we'll never get it back.
Yeah.
And I mean, the difference though is we're like in our 30s, so it's possible.
Yeah. No, but I mean like those muscles, that training, it's deep. It really is deep. Like I think it's been a couple weeks since I've pulled since probably before Christmas, but like I know probably sometime this week, probably tomorrow I'm going to show up at Dollhouse and I'm still going to like it's not going to be great, but I know I'm going to be able to show up and do some stuff.
Yeah. It's that ripping off the band-aid, and like I'm doing the 31 days with Dan and just seeing how like out of shape I got. And it's okay. I was doing other things. It was a rebuilding year last year for me, and I needed to step back. And then I fell out of love with pole. So unless I was prepping for a show or a class, I wasn't training. I really wasn't. Everything I was
Yeah.
doing was to serve like a very specific purpose in relation to how I worked as an instructor instead of at pole as a passion, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
it's been very humbling to see where I was at on that day 2 check-in, and then also had to sit down with myself and be like, it is okay. Like, accept it. It's okay. And
Yeah.
keep following the process. Stop being angry with yourself. Stop beating yourself up. Like, it is what it is. And we're going to move forward. And that, honestly, it sounds simple, but it was revolutionary for me.
Yeah,
Groundbreaking.
no, it is so revolutionary to just accept your feelings and accept like the things you've lost. And it feels so good to just be like I'm just happy to be here. And that's where I've tried to get to in full instead of being like these things I've lost, these things I want, instead of being like in the past or in the future. I'm just like so happy to be here. And that's something I think Dan does better than almost anyone else I've taken class with is just like, hey, we're happy to be here. This is great. He makes it so fun.
He really
Not to be
does.
like a Dan plug your
I know.
podcast, but
That's fine. I'll tell you a funny story about him. So I've been taking some classes from Jacob. I think his name. Yeah, the pole wizard. Yeah. Um, so I signed up for some of his stuff because what I like about him is he has a bit of a ballroom dance background. I don't know if you've taken his classes. He's a very good teacher. Um, and so I signed up for some of his stuff, and I've been like posting his little choreos and stuff in my stories. And I get this message from Dan. He goes, I see you taking Jacob's classes, ho.
wow.
And he's like, you've been cheating on me with Athena, now Jacob. And I was like, but Dan, I always come back to you. So then he posts one of Jacob's choreos that he did. So I took his post and I sent it back to him. And I was like, who's the hoe now? And then I was scared because he gets so many DMs that he would forget that he called me a hoe. So that I typed, remember, because like a few weeks ago, you called me a hoe. And so I'm just relating it back to that. And he was like, you're trying so hard to be savage, but you can't. That's too nice.
Aw, he's right.
So you're going in group 2 for Camp Dan, right?
And we're gonna miss each other. We'll fly over Switzerland and high five.
I know. I'm wondering because, they're doing like sets of taxis. I'm staying an extra day on either end in Zurich.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, because I couldn't get flights the way I needed them to work out. So I might, if I can get a later taxi, maybe I'll be able to see you and we can high five like in person.
I would love that.
Yeah. I'm so excited. I bought my tickets this morning. Have you bought your tickets yet?
I just bought them like a couple weeks ago because I was saying, I was like, maybe I won't go, but I was like, we need to buy your tickets. We need to buy your tickets. And I was like, okay.
So exciting. I bought mine this morning and I'm like, this is it. But my passport is it's expired. So I'm sending it off today. And I put expedited.
Oh, thank goodness.
I should get it back in time, right? 3 to 5 weeks.
Yeah, I think so. I don't think don't quote me on it, but I don't think they're impacted right now. I sent mine off in the mail last year, I think, and got it back pretty quickly. So it should be good.
Yeah, and I'm not too worried because I'm like, if something happens and they don't they like lose it or it's taking too long, I know that I sent it off in plenty of time. And I know that I'll have the right to go into one of their fast processing centers and be like, I need my passport. You've had all my stuff. Like it's stuck. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I know I can get a passport quickly if I need to.
Yeah.
Like there's always ways.
Yeah. There are. You got this. If anyone can do it, you can do it.
Well, I remember in 2008, I didn't realize that my driver's license had expired and I was dating Preston and it was taking forever for me to get my driver's license back. So I went to go get a passport and I went in person to do it and they said, oh, it's going to take like 3 to 6 weeks. And I got it in 8 days. So wow. I feel strongly that it's going to be fine.
Yeah, I think it's going to be fine too.
Well, thanks, Erin. I really appreciate you talking with me today. Let's do it again sometime. We can talk about nutrition a little more too, because I think that would be fun.
Yeah, that would be fun. I'm honestly so flattered and honored that you had me on your podcast. So thank you.
I really admire like what you do and the way you think about things. So, I think it's good. And I don't know, it's important. I know we like to think about experts sharing information, and I know that resonates with a lot of people, but I think for the purpose of what I'm trying to do is to let people feel like they're not alone in their struggles as parents. And so I think it's important to hear from, regular experts.
Everyday experts.
Everyday experts. So, so I appreciate it. Well, I will let you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. I'll see you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thank you so much for listening to today's episode, my friends. If you enjoyed today's episode, please feel free to give us a big thumbs up, 5-star, like, subscribe, depending on what modality you happen to be listening in on. Check out the show notes below for ways that you can support this podcast, which is currently fueled by copious amounts of afternoon coffee by yours truly and a passion for supporting women in their pole and movement journeys. Until next time, my friends, keep on dancing and remember there's enough spotlight for all of us to shine.